Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of the Connect the Dots NYC podcast. I'm your host, Vedant Vohra, and I'm so excited to take you on this journey as we explore different solutions to homelessness. As the creator of the CTD NYC app, I've seen how technology can connect people to vital resources. CTD NYC helps individuals experiencing homelessness in New York City access shelters, food, and healthcare, bridging the gap between them and essential services. It's a powerful example of innovation meeting compassion to tackle the homelessness crisis. Each episode will dive into stories, strategies, and innovations from those on the front lines, whether they're advocates, policymakers, service providers, or individuals with lived experiences. My goal is to spark meaningful conversations and shine a light on the incredible work being done to make housing more accessible for everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get started. Our guest today is Will Woods. Will Woods is an advocate, mentor, and community organizer whose journey from homelessness to empowerment drives his dedication to creating opportunities for others facing similar challenges. He currently serves as the Member Education and Programming Specialist at Open Hearts Initiative, a nonprofit that amplifies the voices of those experiencing homelessness and promotes housing as a human right. In this role, Will develops advocacy programs and raises public awareness about homelessness and racial justice. He also serves on the board of Care for the Homeless and is active with Urban Pathways Consumer Advocacy Program. Will has testified before the New York City Council advocating for better public bathroom access, highlighting the urgent needs of unhoused individuals. His work focuses on breaking down systemic barriers and encouraging entrepreneurship to foster self-sufficiency. Welcome, Will.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to get started with your personal story. Can you walk us through your journey from homelessness to entrepreneurship?
Wow, it's been a journey. It's been a journey that honestly has spanned pretty much the last decade of my life. My family and I have had brushes with homelessness from the time where I was very young. Um, Whether that be going through a divorce as a family and being exposed to homelessness because the primary breadwinner in the family had moved on, and so we didn't have the income necessary to support the rent for where we lived. Whether it be because of having a home foreclosed around us, even though we were paying our monthly rent, and the homeowner wasn't paying the mortgage, and several other different situations. But it was interesting for me because growing up, starting to work at 17, and being kind of fostered in the corporate environment at the time, I swore that I would never be homeless. I was going to do everything possible to be the smart, successful inner city kid that was going to make it in New York City. And, did a whole lot savings wise and planning wise and mapping out my future was going to be. And then the thing that I thought about the least, which was my health, failed me. And that led me into homelessness. And it was an eye-opening experience. Just how I was perceived, things that I had access to, the way that friends and colleagues changed their interaction with me. It was a lot to overcome. But also at the same time, because of my background, because of my nature of being inquisitive and wanting to ask questions and see how things work, I wasn't satisfied with quote unquote just being homeless. It wasn't something that that sat well with me. And so one of the things that I tried to do as I was kind of rehabbing from the trauma of experiencing homelessness was try to help folks going on that journey with me understand that, hey, look, we still have things to do. There are still opportunities. We can still network. We can still grow. And that kind of just put me onto this path of advocacy and bringing back and re-empowering folks that have been through a horrible, horrible experience, which is just, literally being homeless.
And what was the hardest part of your experience that most people wouldn't expect?
I think the most difficult part was this fact that when you experience homelessness, there's still a large set of folks who consider that to be your fault. you did something, you messed up somehow, and that caused you to be homeless, and now you're a risk factor for anything else that you're evaluated to be a part of, because hey, somehow there's this mindset of, if I can't trust you to maintain and keep a home, how can I trust you with doing everything else? And that was a difficult thing for me to deal with as a person who was homeless, but it was also difficult for me to deal with in my interpersonal circles, with people that I worked with day in and day out for hundreds of hours at a time, for years at a time, uh, completely changing their impression and their outlook and the way that they interacted with me. Oftentimes it was really quite painful.
And during these really hard moments, what kept you going?
Um, Two things. One is you spend a lot of time getting to know yourself, what you can and can't do, where your barriers are, what your limits are, when you can push, how you can push. Things that, what, this here is the line. We are drawing the line here, and positively or negatively, it's kind of not gonna go any farther than this. And then the other thing being the this community, this lovely, wonderful, amazing, supportive community that you will find amongst those experiencing homelessness, where it's kind of like, hey, look, the rest of the world has considered us down and out, but no, we're not going to do that. We believe in each other. We're going to do what we can to support each other. We're going to try to keep pushing forward. And you know what? It Today may not be your day, but I've got you today, and you've got me tomorrow. And we're going to figure this thing out, and we're going to keep pushing through.
And was there ever a specific person, organization, or event that helped you shift course?
Absolutely. I think one of the toughest things when you're experiencing homelessness, when you're down on yourself, is that it's really important for someone that's not you to see you. And I use that word, intentionally, just to see. And whether not just where you are or what you are, but what you can be, what you have the capability of doing, and then kind of leaning into that. So for me, that was named Nicole McVinu, who was the former director of policy at Urban Pathways. I never had considered any kind of work in advocacy at all pre-experiencing homelessness. And Nicole was one of the first people that were just like, hey, you know what? If you're gonna ask these kind of questions, it might be cool if you do it in these spaces, because these are the folks that need to be able to give you those kind of answers. Or hey, you've got these kind of skills with facilitating conversation, getting to know people that you developed in your corporate world. We can actually use that here in these spaces. Or hey, you've got a really great understanding of how shelters providers trying to do things organizationally, but you've also got a really great spot as someone who the community of folks who are receiving services from this provider, they also listen to you, they respond to you, they tell you your concerns and your stories. It'd be really great if you could then bring that to us and kind of put me in this spot where, one, I was kind of liaisoning between administration and staff at a shelter provider and recipients of services, but also just continuing this idea of putting me in rooms where, my skills with storytelling or being personable or interacting, the same skills that I would use to kind of close a sale in the business world, I was able to use in advocacy, especially with sitting across from elected officials or having really hard conversations with disinterested neighbors, that I never would have thought that I had skills at if you had asked me. But she kind of kept pushing me and providing me with opportunities and asking questions, or kind of guiding and directing me, and helped me on this path that I am now. And I will be forever grateful to her for that.
I now want to shift a little bit towards entrepreneurship and pursuing entrepreneurship both while unhoused, but both as a form, also as a form of growing out of that unhoused circumstance. So, did you ever think of starting a business while homeless? Why or why not?
Absolutely. One, because that's what we all kind of do. You have a lot of time in your hands when you're experiencing homelessness. And, kind of humans just being the way we are, you start to dream and plan and talk about, hey, if I had this, I'd do this. Or if I won this lotto, or if I get money off this scratch off, I'm going to do this and this. Or, hey, if I was in charge, we would do this, that, and the third. And It's not an easy step, but it's a natural step past those kind of initial declarations of what I'm planning to do or what I would do if I had the opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Well, what would this actually look like? How can we plan this out? What could we potentially do about this thing? I think for me personally, coming from a corporate background again, I think there's something in all of us where we kind of, you know, get to a point where it's like, hey, I've got this idea that I can totally build a whole business around and I can be my own boss and I don't have to answer to the man. I can make all the money kind of thing. Um, but it's absolutely something that I've thought about many different times and in many different ways over the years.
And what do you think are the biggest barriers to starting a business as a homeless person in New York City?
Honestly, Um, being considered a viable candidate, being considered as someone who has an idea that's worthwhile and worth pursuing. There's this kind of idea, this mentality again that folks that are experiencing homelessness are the dregs of society. They've got nothing beneficial left to give, and so why should we pay them any mind? It's still kind of a pervasive thing. Also, you tend to be dealing with communities that are chronically underserved, underdeveloped, underinformed, undereducated. So this idea of creating a business or being an entrepreneur is not a path that most folks will follow right away, just because even before experiencing homelessness, it's not a pathway that they thought was available to them. Or available to folks who look like them. So it's not something that they're going to be able to pursue. I think the last part that's really important is for people that want to develop their own business, there are usually safety nets in place to help them do so, whether it's to be creative, whether it's startup capital, whether it's investor support, whether it's just a group of friends who will follow behind to do that idea. Most folks experiencing homelessness don't have access to any of those things. So it's not a path that seems reasonable, at least on the outset, for them to follow.
And what do you think are some of the current pathways, programs, partnerships, or resources that support unhoused entrepreneurs, if they exist?
Grassroots nonprofits, especially in New York City, do what work they can. Here's the thing: when you're talking about an idea, it's difficult to be able to outlay concrete support, right? And that's where most entrepreneurs begin just with an idea, right? Um, there are there are some uh, city and state level partnerships that are available to really look, but they're a bit of a hassle to kind of get through. Um, but for the most part, a lot of times it's a word of mouth situation. It may be an organization, it may be a volunteer, it may be someone who's working as for a provider who just so happens to know someone who can kind of open the pathway or the connection or the avenue for a conversation that might springboard or support uh, an idea from someone experiencing homelessness.
And this question is a little bit more specific. But for these unhoused entrepreneurs, can they start a business using a PO box instead of using a fixed address?
You know what? That's a really great question. I love that as a follow up because especially in New York City, you can't. You can't. You can use a PO box for your business once it's been established to receive mail, but the documentation for registering a business generally requires that you have a street address, whether that be a home address or generally speaking, a home address or a business address if you're lucky enough to have that opportunity. It kind of reminds me of an invitation that was made by a friend of mine early on when I was first having some ideas, where she offered to allow me to use her home address as the address for the documentation that I was using for the business plan, just because it wouldn't have made sense or wouldn't have been looked at if I had submitted that information with a PO box.
And how do other things like identification, bank accounts, or digital access affect the ability to launch a business?
This is another great follow-up. Um, Again, when you're dealing with folks experiencing homelessness overall, you're dealing with parts of our regular society who have been marginalized. So there isn't a lot of internet access, for example, in inner city communities. You've got a lot of folks experiencing homelessness that are senior citizens, and so they're not as comfortable with technology as, say, one of their counterparts maybe. You've got folks, especially folks who have been enduring street homelessness for a long time, who may not have any documentation at all, whether it be because they don't have a mailing address, whether it be because they've lost documentations in something like a street encampment sweep, or it's just something that kind of just gets lost in the wayside because you know what? We don't have some place to lock up. We don't have a strong box or a safe deposit box or whatever it is to keep our legal documents in so that we always have access to them. And then not to mention the wait time and the fees that can accrue when you're trying to replace some of these documents, or frankly, the supporting documents you need to get something like an ID in the state of New York are not something that someone experiencing homelessness has ready access to.
And I want to continue on this track, but I want to move towards mentorship and support that can be given to these unhoused entrepreneurs. So, do you think people experiencing homelessness would benefit more from an online mentorship sign up program, an in person government backed investor space, or a blend of both?
I think a blend of both would be great. You know, at the online membership sponsorship sign up is great, but again, you're potentially losing a segment of the audience who's not familiar with technology, doesn't have that access. Um, there are programs, like I mentioned earlier, from the city and the state to support small businesses, whether that be in the initial process of collating and putting together the documentation needed, getting funding and the like. Although some of those processes may be a little complicated for the everyday person. Um, but I think the idea of there being a government, especially a government sponsored space, is really intriguing, and it kind of would reverse some of the mentality, language, and energy directed towards folks experiencing homelessness. We're starting to see that there are definitive efforts to make sure to amplify minorities, minority women, folks of color. But and those are really great initiatives. Not to take anything away from those. But again, uh, when you've got an underserved segment of your community, you kind of also need to address those folks too. A lot of the a lot of the opportunities are available for folks that are kind of already existing, so to speak. But there's not so much energy behind, hey, look, we haven't necessarily directed something intentionally toward your population before. Let's see if there's some things that we can do here. Because especially as we continue to move forward, especially in New York, the amount of folks that are at risk for homelessness, the amount of folks who work full time and experience homelessness, um, the amount of folks who are often just kind of right on the margin lines where, hey, one or two things don't really go right, they also would experience homelessness. There are a lot of really talented people out there who honestly are just waiting for an opportunity, and they stop pushing for it because they keep being told that they don't deserve it.
And on that note, and on a little bit more of a personal level, what kind of mentorship did you wish you had when starting out?
Sometimes it's really just as simple as talking to someone who's been through it before. So, as I have developed my career in advocacy and kind of building on a personal goal of getting into consultancy, which is what I wanted to do when I was way back in the day when I was a corporate animal. Um, just being able, hey, you know what? What makes sense here? Should I register my business in New York as opposed to another state? What's the fee structure right? I heard something about, hey, if I'm going to open a business, I got to also list in a newspaper. Is that a cost? Okay, hey, I hear these terms: business plan, proposal, prospectus, RFP, all these different things. What does that mean? And what does that look like? Hey, I did this thing. You've got experience in this field. Can you just look over what I did? I mean, well, it kind of, again, the same thing that we may do for, let's say, a new hire or a junior member of a team, where we're just like, hey, you know what? I've got experience with this and I can see what you're doing. Here's just a couple of things that I know that you can benefit from as you go forward. That was absolutely amazing. Sometimes just the opportunity of, hey, let me explain to you about how I try to do this 3 different times. And here's one that was successful. And here's one that's failed. And here's why that's failed. Again, the same kind of networking opportunities that everybody else gets, the same kind of informational, informative, educational opportunities that quote unquote everybody else would get, should also be made available to folks experiencing homelessness.
And how important is it having a business role model for someone living in a shelter?
It depends, because it's not going to be everybody's bag, right? Some folks are just trying to focus on what they've got to do to get through tomorrow. Some folks are dealing with health concerns. Some folks are dealing with mental health issues. It's all different. But for people who either have come in from the corporate background, or for people who have really, kind of engaged and thought through this process, it would be nice just to have the opportunity, just to if for no other reason, it kind of just reminds you of value as a person. It reminds you that you can be a contributing member of society. Um, but also just this idea of just because you're experiencing homelessness doesn't mean that it's okay to kick you to the curb. You can still be as intellectual as you want to be, as inquisitive as you want to be. You can still want to learn. You can still want to do better. You might be you might be teaching someone a skill set that they've never had the opportunity to learn in their entire life. I mean, from grade school to whatever their adult life experience is. And there's something really redeeming, I think, on both ends. As someone who's learning and growing and developing and continuing to kind of evolve as a person, but also for on the other side, like, hey, you know what? I got to get these skills and learn these skills, and it's great that I have them. But it's also lovely, like, seeing this passion that I'm helping awaken and kindle in another person, and watching them grow and develop, which is, at the end of the day, kind of what we need for our communities to continue to grow and flourish.
I now want to move towards specific businesses that these unhoused entrepreneurs could create. So, what types of businesses or industries do you see as most accessible or promising for unhoused individuals?
Um, one you like I mentioned earlier that when you are experiencing homelessness, you've got a lot of free time, and you get to learn a lot, whether about yourself, whether about skills you have, whether, forgive me, we might have to record this part. I'm just gonna give a minute and let the sirens pass, because me walking to the other end of the house didn't help.
That's
um
fine. That's
okay, as that passes, forgive me, New York City.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same place there. I've been muting myself every time you speak just because I'm like,
It's
I
just
don't want.
like, and I mean, any other day my block is dead, literally dead. But because we're doing this now, we got to have multiple sirens.
Yeah. No. Of course. Of course. If you want, I can. Once the science, I can re-ask the
Yes,
question, and
go
then you
ahead and
can
just
like
re-ask the
re-answer.
question. I think that'd be great. Yep.
Okay. I want to move to specific types of businesses that unhoused entrepreneurs could make. And so, what types of businesses or industries do you see as most accessible or promising for unhoused individuals?
So for me, the one that immediately comes to mind, just because it's an interest of mine, is writing. I think in my time experiencing homelessness and with supportive housing, I probably met more writers and cooks than anything. So whether it be developing a cookbook, like I've had the pleasure of watching one volunteer work with someone in shelter to do, whether it be poetry, short stories. I've worked with a couple of playwrights. I had the opportunity to work with a poet laureate, even, which is just insane. You've got folks who've got skills, automotive wise, fixing cars, repairing cars, restoring cars. You've got, given the time that we're in now, you've got folks who have been cleaners, whether that be office or home or business. You've got caregivers, especially with, a lot of folks who are retirees now, or seniors, or folks that are aging in place, and their fixed income doesn't support, where they're living, and so now they're at risk for homelessness. You've got folks who were retired and thought they were good, what I mean, who worked their whole lives. I know folks that work in healthcare. um I know folks that work in education. I know folks that do babysitting. um I know folks who sew, design and fashion, and I think just separately, just there's a whole cottage industry, if we work it right, for peer specialists. Folks that have been through it, who understand it, who are also experiencing mental health, who have worked with survivors, who have done the voucher system, who are literally experienced veterans of this entire thing, who can connect with folks experiencing homelessness for the first time on a level differently than a caseworker or a social worker or a cop or things like that. Whether that be in a supportive housing environment, whether that be in shelter, whether that be in a hospital or some kind of other setting, whether that be at a community center. There are dozens of fields, honestly, that could use the influx and the energy of folks experiencing homelessness.
So, focusing on a couple specific fields, have you seen success in areas like vending, art, mobile services, or digital freelance work?
Well, some of these are difficult because, again, you're talking about a specific level of technical expertise. However, I know a young man who spent many years in prison. Went in as a teen, came out as an adult, who got his doctorate while in prison, who had an idea, honestly, for an app while he was in prison. And, in an opportunity that we had to do a lunch and learn with a corporate partner, um, that was actually a programming company, a tech company. A couple of the employers, they were like, this is a really great idea. And they worked with him to actually, publish and develop the app. I didn't mention it before, but we've got artists. I was recently, within the last month, at a community meeting with another nonprofit, and one of the regular attendees just decided to bring about 7 or 8 of her paintings that she had done, her oil paintings that she had done over her time in shelter, and was just like, hey, I just wanted to share these, and people were like, no, I want to buy this. This is amazing. This is awesome. Where it was like, oh, she was like, I never did these with the idea of selling them. I didn't think this would be something that people would want to buy. But oh my God, like someone just commissioned me to do something. Um, whether it be, oh gosh, there was a lady who was ridiculous. I'm gonna mess this up. It was knitting. There was yarn. It was needle. So I'm not sure if it was knitting or crocheting. But these amazingly adorable little, you know, pick what you want. Whether it was like a character, a yarn interpretation of a character, a minion or something like that, or you needed a doily to lay over the the toilet, whatever it was. If you could describe it and you could pick the colors, she could weave it, kind of deal. And I think
Right.
sometimes these are like the little things that we just kind of forget about, um, when we think about folks experiencing homelessness.
So, do you think shelters should offer workshops or co working spaces for people looking to start something like businesses?
This is a little bit of a loaded question. Um, and I say that because for the most part, shelter staff are limited in what they can do. Not that they wouldn't be interested, not that they want to have, wouldn't want to help in a lot of cases. But between what their workload is administratively, those responsibilities, and then like, well, caseloads and the like. For the most part, day-to-day interaction with someone experiencing homelessness is reliant on a case manager. And depending on the provider, that case manager could have and the amount of time they work, could have anywhere from 15 to 50 people in their caseload. And so it's really hard to give individualized attention and mentorship in those kind of cases. Um, I think that it really be a great opportunity for businesses. Really, really big for the corporate sector, especially when you think about community responsibility, community give back. And they, businesses generally have the background and the resources, the amount of people and the flexibility to work better in these spaces and kind of to be able to organize these type of opportunities than a shelter can. On the other side of that, though, shelter providers, and I'm speaking more administratively, generally also have folks on their payroll whose job it is to develop relationships with folks in the community. And a lot of times, unfortunately, that kind of just revolves around, hey, is there like, cool like third spaces for folks to be in where it's not going to be too crazy, or we make sure that we've got relationships with healthcare providers to take care of referrals and the things and like that. But I think, there's also a space for, hey, you want to come in and teach this. If you're gonna have workshop opportunities, hey, you know what, let's have a few seats available maybe for some folks that are in shelters in our local community that might be interested in learning about this. Hey, if there's gonna be one-on-one opportunities, hey, bring us an idea. Hey, we're gonna have an open house. I think really as this particular thing here, outside of regular donations or things like that, or employees volunteering their time, would be a really great space for private sector, for commercial businesses and the like, to get involved in the communities that they reside in for this particular type of thing, especially.
So I want to expand onto a broader policy level where maybe changes can be implemented such that these co-working and workshop spaces can be made and regulated in almost all of shelters or different spaces across New York City, for example. So what sort of policy changes could make it easier for people facing housing insecurity to become entrepreneurs?
Um, this is difficult for me only because I don't branch into policy as much, but I do have conversations with policy folks within the sector, and just a couple of things even that I've thought of. So hopefully this works. It I think that any business, for example, that might get complementary funding for you know being housed in certain communities, or for if they're getting a subsidy for providing a service or the like, or even if not that, even if they have the capacity to provide pro bono time, it would kind of really be something that should actually just be part of uh one corporate policy. Hey, look, we've got these apartments, we've got this folder, we've got this time allocated. Instead of leaving it kind of general for you to fill in, we're gonna ask that it's specifically focused on this sites or these folks, whatever, that are within, walking distance of where our offices are, so to speak. I think that on the city and state level, um, a lot more can be done with just being transparent and informing folks on what programs are available, when they're available, how they can be accessed. I think that it's important uh, tangentially to make sure that there is adequate Wi-Fi and internet access in every shelter and supportive housing site, so that folks are able to get online from home, honestly, that they don't have to go find another location, or travel to the local library, or the like, to be able to access some of these services. I think that it's also incumbent to make sure, just policy wise, that there is an option for internet access for folks that are experiencing homelessness or a low income. It's very easy to be priced out of something that is, nowadays is literally essential to everyone's day-to-day living. I think that the final thing that I think would be great is honestly, we're human beings, right? Incentivize stuff. Like hey, look, not so much, hey, this is a requirement, but hey, look, if this is something that you're interested in, and you can do these three things, provide all, I'm making this up right now on top of my head, provide all the documentation, come up with a representative business plan, and like be able to pitch it to a panel. You're eligible for a certain amount of seed money. You're able to walk all your way, all the way through. But then even at the end of whatever, establishing whatever the business opportunity is, there's assistance with advertising. There's assistance with, hey, we're gonna funnel folks that can use this service to you. That you kind of really actualize this partnership concept. Like, hey, here's your idea. We appreciate this. And we're going to try to amplify everything that we can do to help you. Even for simple small things. I ride the train all the time, and I do enjoy, for example, when you get a train car that has one of the billboards with poetry on it, right? And there's a lot of times where I'm just sitting there and I'm just reading. I'm like, this is great, and I love this, and I appreciate it. What would be really cool if all of these different things, these were commissioned or contracted to someone who was experiencing homelessness. Not so that the text of whatever is up here is necessarily homelessness related, but hey, like, that would be cool, because that's an opportunity that a writer experiencing homelessness is never gonna get, kind of deal. Those kind of things where it's just like, hey, we're opening this up to whatever the audience is, but are we also opening up to the whatever, like, and forgive me for phrasing it this way, whatever the lowest rung is in the area that we're opening up to, and that may very well include someone experiencing homelessness.
And what can ordinary New Yorkers do to support entrepreneurship among the homeless community?
Well, this is where you can just really just be a good neighbor, right? So of course, somewhere buried in there is you actually kind of you got to get to know folks, right? You got to know who they are, what they're about, and have some conversations with them before someone's kind of going to share their business opportunity idea with you. So there's that part of it, of course. But I think sometimes when we talk about homelessness, and it's this big, giant, Stonehenge looking monolithic idea, right? And it's just like, there's nothing that I can do. But a lot of times the biggest problems are resolved by a multitude of tiny solutions. We all, honestly, we all work, right? So sometimes it's hey, I'm hearing this idea being pitched at my job, and this is lovely and this is great. Can I raise my hand and ask, hey, is there a way that we can extend this to XYZ? If there's a program or an opportunity that you know of, maybe you want to bring it to a local shelter. Hey, we're looking for folks that are interested in this, that, and the third. Here's how we want to do it. Here's how it's going to be funded. Here's how long it takes. Would folks here be interested, so that I can make sure that your names and your information get where it needs to go? Kind of deal. Sometimes it's just the idea of knowing when and where to speak up. Whether that be at a community board, whether that be if you're noticing some type of inequity, in a place that you like to frequent, or in a place that you live near, where it's like, hey, look, I love that you're soliciting art again, just bring that back again from these folks, and these folks. Have you also made sure that your flyer has gotten here, and here, because these folks are artists too? It doesn't have to be anything major. I just had a great conversation with a volunteer that works for a company that sells shaving products. Where it was just like, hey, you guys have you guys have a community service arm where you guys do regular donations. Have you ever thought about partnering with supportive housing sites, in different neighborhoods in New York? Like that could be as small as, hey, here's this one building and it's like 20 people. It could be as wide as, hey, there's this service provider and you've got 5 buildings. So we're going to make sure that on a quarterly basis, hey, you know what, we're going to give you 40 shaving kits. It could be as large as, hey, you know what, you're, you guys are the supportive housing of New York coalition. You've got a bunch of supportive housing providers all together. We're going to kick this up from our local to our national office and see if, hey, we can just do a partnership where folks in all of the providers in your coalition can get a donation, kind of deal. So it's just a matter of just kind of just thinking it through. What could help, how could it help, and then just asking the question. At worst, the answer is going to be no.
And as my last question, if you could build a citywide initiative to support people in shelters starting businesses, what would it look like?
I think it would be great to get a group of folks together that can really provide, just kind of a grounding presence that can provide the technical support, the legal support, and the emotional support necessary. So whether that be having a group of lawyers that can come together, that can kind of walk through, hey, here's the business plan, and here's how we construct the business plan, and here's how we're going to go through this. Whether it's going to be a set of folks that you can kind of practice your pitch with, whether that be an elevator pitch, whether that be in front of the room pitch, whether that be something with boarding or not boarding, whether it be someone who just has time. Hey, I am kind of technically savvy. I can be here just as a resource for you to reach out to as you're doing these documents in these different forms. If it's something that doesn't make sense or you don't understand this, or hey, you know what? I speak Spanish fluently. These forms, for whatever reason, are only in English. I can help you translate and do what you need to do. Whether it be, folks even further along, business owners, board members, or the like, that can help provide oversight, that can help talk about what there might be that you need to be aware of, if you're hiring folks, if you've got to deal with the HR part, like, what, hey, my company covers HR for a bunch of nonprofits, da, 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 da. We also have space for, some very small, we can handle all this for you, kind of deal. Or depending on the size of the company, hey, we're gonna put money aside to fund this. Or hey, if this gets to a certain point, we're gonna match, or we'll add technicians from our, whatever it is. I think that, and I apologize that I don't have a more specific answer, but I think that I will sum it up with saying that we, especially as New Yorkers, and especially when we're talking about folks at risk for homelessness or experiencing homelessness, we get into this idea of can't. They can't, we can't, it can't. And we stop thinking, and it just becomes it's very tough, it's very locked down, it's very, you get stuck. And it's not very motivating for you to keep putting yourself out there and do things forward. If we can get to this idea of what can we do? How can we do? It's just so much. It's just so empowering. It gives folks things to look forward to. It gives folks a reason to keep pushing forward. A lot of folks in the entrepreneurial space are able to do that because of the safety nets that they have, whether it be financially, whether it be, in their family, whether it be emotional support. Like, they can keep going out there and taking risks, right? You can't really do that when you're experiencing homelessness. You don't have, if you had those safety nets, you probably wouldn't have been experiencing homelessness to begin with, right? So, you kind of just get pigeonholed into, well, this is all that I can do, and this is all that I'm good for, which is just very limiting and disenfranchising and not what, building each other up is supposed to be about. So getting into this space of, you know what, I believe in you, I see you, you know what, let's give it a try. Hey, you know what, even if this venture fails, look at all the work and the good that you did, and now it's kind of put you 2 steps ahead in your next thing. It's really important. It The biggest thing in all of this for me was this idea of relearning that it's okay to fail, because for a lot of us, you know what, we failed and we ended up homeless, right? And that's it doesn't get much lower than that, and it doesn't really push you to take risks, want to take a risk again, and potentially lose it all. So we could do we could do so much with just the building back up of people if we just give it a shot.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate your time and your experience.
No problem. No problem. My pleasure.